John Rolfe was a settler in the Jamestown colony who was involved in its heroic saving, economic success, most famous relationship, and one of its most tragic moments. Jamestown was the first established English settlement in North America and had been struggling to get off the ground for 4 years when John Rolfe and his crewmates showed up in 1611 on a ship called the Sea Venture, which barely escaped sinking on its way to Virginia in 1610 to help repopulate and resupply the colony after a period in Jamestown known as the Starving Time, in which the colony almost collapsed due to malnutrition. Jamestown was a struggling, swampy outpost in the early 1600s and became a booming ag society for cash crops and became one of the most influential areas in all of America. And it happened perhaps mostly in part due to Rolfe. In 1611, he began planting some tobacco seeds he had smuggled in from Trinidad. Up until the settlement of Jamestown, the global tobacco market had been controlled by the Spanish, but Europe was hooked on the stuff. This tobacco he had was similar to that of the Spanish variety and smoked pleasant, sweet, and strong. Rolfe described his plant saying, "Likewise tobacco, which there thriveth so well that no doubt, but after a little more trial and experience in the curing thereof, it will compare with the best in the West Indies." He was not wrong. Well, so we are told. The numbers speak for themselves. He begins to plant it, as do the rest of the colonists, and the boom begins. By 1617, so just 6 years after Rolfe arrived, tobacco exports to England totaled 20,000 pounds. The next year, 40,000 pounds. By 1630, 1.5 million pounds were exported out of the region of Virginia, North Carolina, and Maryland. It wasn't how Virginia was planned, but it's how it worked out. It simply became a tobacco boom town, an area that took up a lot of land to plant tobacco, land that would be taken from local Indian nations. I wonder if taking lands from local Indian nations will ever come back to haunt the Jamestown settlers. Anyway, even though Jamestown couldn't sustain itself, they sent enough tobacco back to Europe to have supply ships bring back to Virginia everything they needed to build a thriving society, and all of this basically started with Rolfe. 2 years into the infancy of the Virginia tobacco boom, the Jamestown settlers were still struggling to get along with the local Indian nations. A league of tribes united under the rule of Powhatan. Powhatan's dearest daughter was Pocahontas, who had interactions with English settlers going back to John Smith in 1607, and she often acted as a translator and a diplomat. At the height of conflicts between the English settlers and the Powhatan tribes, Pocahontas, who was now 16 in 1613, was asked to accompany a rival tribe, the Potawatomi, to the Jamestown settlement. It was a trap. One of the settlers, Samuel Argall, kind of a huge jerk, made a secret deal with the Potawatomi to help lure her to Jamestown and then onto a boat in order to kidnap her. While kidnapped, she learned the English language and English customs. I wonder if kidnapping the daughter of the leader of over 30,000 American Indians will ever come back to haunt the colonists. There she meets John Rolfe, the tobacco planter, who of course falls in love with her, but struggles with the idea of marrying what he calls a heathen savage. The idea did not compute with Rolfe to marry a Native American woman. After much deliberation and a letter to the governor stating that, quote, "It is Pocahontas to whom my hearty and best thoughts are, and have been a long time so entangled and enthralled in so intricate a labyrinth that I could not unwind myself thereout," end quote. The two, Pocahontas and John Rolfe, were married. I wonder if making the Powhatan's daughter get married to an Englishman when she was already married to an Indian named Coquitlam will ever come back to haunt the colonists. Anyway, she allegedly converts to Christianity and her name is changed to Rebecca. The two had a son named Thomas and traveled to England, where she became quite the sensation, as you might imagine. She met the Queen, saw John Smith again, encouraged more settlement in Virginia, but she unfortunately passed away from tuberculosis. Now I wonder if the Powhatan will mind if Pocahontas died in Europe. A couple years later, Rolfe marries again, this time to a woman named Jane. They would only be married for 3 years. Why 3 years, you ask? Way back when Rolfe first arrived with his tobacco seeds in 1610, the leaders of the colony lured the local tribe into coming to their fort with the invitation of music and feasting. When the Powhatan Indians arrived, they were slaughtered by the English. I wonder if that surprise attack will ever come back to haunt the colonists. Probably won't. This fighting back and forth ended or cooled off with the kidnapping and ransom of Pocahontas. But with the death of Pocahontas and with the tribe under new leadership of Opechancanough, the tribe was ready to retaliate for past attacks. After another Indian leader was murdered by an English settler in 1622, I wonder if... Yes, okay, this is it. Opechancanough planned for retaliation and led the Powhatan Confederacy in a coordinated series of surprise attacks on the colonists. One account says the Powhatan brought feast to the colonists, laid down their food, picked up knives, and slaughtered them there. They were, though, unable to attack the main area of Jamestown thanks to an Indian spy, which was the only reason that saved the colony from complete destruction. A total of 347 settlers were killed in the massacre of 1622. This was 1/4 of the entire Jamestown population, including, yes, our boy John Rolfe. Eventually, the English would fight back with a surprise attack on their own, poisoning the drinks of the Powhatan during the faux celebration. This was the beginning of the end of the Powhatan Confederacy and the beginning of the Virginia colony, which never would have gotten off the ground, really, if it weren't for John Rolfe.